Yeah.
I gotta remember the minute before. Okay. All right. It is moments from being 9:30 exactly on the dot, and so we will hold our work session. These sessions are recorded as well as our regular sessions, but we don't do the official session and start that until 10 o'clock. We have 2 items listed for the work session, so we'll start with those 2 first, and if time permits, we'll roll into whatever else. Otherwise, we'll cover it in the regular session agenda that begins at 10 o'clock. Michael, you're Michael, right? So I do have you first. I was going to have you go first, but if you want to go first, I don't know if your schedule needs, you need to get moving or anything.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, my name is Michael Gaynor. I'm with Go Rail, and I appreciate your time this morning, Commissioners. I'm traveling throughout Seneca, Huron, and Lorain counties this week, briefing local elected officials on federal transportation issues that could impact the area. And so just by way of background, Go Rail, we're a national nonprofit. We're headquartered out of Washington, D.C., although we operate in about 30 states, and most of our staff is spread out across the country. I'm located in Columbus, Ohio, and cover a number of the states in the Midwest. Go Rail was created about 10 years ago to promote the public benefits of freight rail, which is pretty extensive. As you may be aware, freight rail is one of the most environmentally friendly modes of transportation. We can now move a ton of freight, about 480 miles on 1 gallon of fuel. And so that helps to save the environment and the impact on the local environment. Of course, for Ohio, freight rail also helps to reduce congestion on the highway system, which is critical right now. Transportation officials are projecting a 62% increase in freight movement going out over the next 20 years, and no one's exactly sure how our roads are going to accommodate a 60% increase in truck movement. And fortunately, freight rail has the capacity and ability to accommodate more of that freight and to help alleviate the burden on our highway system. And so that reduces congestion, it reduces the wear and the tear on the roads, and that reduces the impact on taxpayers for the maintenance of those roads. But most importantly is the economic impact of freight rail. For Ohio, we're the third largest. We have the third largest rail infrastructure in the nation in terms of rail miles, and we are second only to the state of Illinois on the number of intermodal facilities, which is really helping to drive the logistics system. Are you familiar with intermodal? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so intermodal allows...
Newest one's North Baltimore.
What's that? North Baltimore, right.
The newest one in this area.
Right, and then Marion Intermodal's not too far. That's growing by leaps and bounds. And so we have 11 intermodal facilities in the state of Ohio, which is, just like I said, just second to the state of Illinois that has a couple more than us. But intermodal allows freight to travel the longest distance possible on the most fuel-efficient, cost-effective mode, which is typically rail. And it's really redefining how we move goods around the nation. And so for Ohio, this is all very good, because if you're a manufacturer or a shipper and you want to relocate and be strategically by rail, Ohio is one of the states that you're looking at. And so that's a good thing for Ohio right now. It's an economic advantage that we have over other states. And we're also the recipient of record investment right now. The railroads are investing on average about $26 billion in private capital into the freight rail network. Since 1980, they've invested about $550 billion all in private capital into that rail network. And so CXS has their Heartland Corridor that comes through Seneca County that connects you to Chicago and then to all of the East Coast ports via double-stacked service, and so that provides lower shipping rates for local manufacturers and shippers. And so we want to see that record investment continue. We want to see Ohio's service continue to increase and grow. An obstacle to that is some legislation or some policies that are being reviewed in Washington right now that we're concerned about. Going back about 30 years, the freight railroads were virtually controlled by the federal government prior to 1980. The federal government set rates, they set routes. It was a very inefficient system that led to decades of decline. You may be familiar with the government creating Conrail in an attempt to save East Coast rail service back in the 70s. And by 1980, we were in a situation where railroads were no longer revenue adequate. They couldn't invest back in that infrastructure. The infrastructure was degrading. It was becoming unreliable. Standing derailments were a common occurrence. That's when the train isn't even moving. It just falls off the track because the bed is in such disrepair. And about 20% of all rail miles at that time were in bankruptcy. And boy, what a long way. I mean, some people actually then were talking about rail service not existing anymore in the future. And what a long way we've come now, where we're in the midst of a real renaissance that is helping to create jobs and drive the economy here in Ohio. And if you look in your packet there is on the second sheet in, there is, on the second page of that one, you can see there's a graph there. And so there's some different measures of the railroad success, productivity, volume, revenue. You can see it's pretty apparent where the federal government got out of the business of managing the railroads. It was an explosion for the audience on the graph. There's kind of an explosion of productivity, volume, everything's up. The only thing that is down is rates. And even today's average rail rate is 42% lower than what it was in 1980. Nearly half. I'm at a loss to think of anything that costs half of what it did in 1980, except for maybe my old album collection. But so the point is the federal government getting out of the business of managing the railroads. It's been good for the railroads, good for the customers, good for America. And so we want to see that continue. The Surface Transportation Board has regulatory authority over the railroads. So anytime a railroads combine, or they want to sell track, or you want to take a rail to trail system or something like that, that's all has to be approved by the Surface Transportation Board. And then they also exist if customers feel that their rate is unfair. They can go to the Surface Transportation Board to dispute that. The Surface Transportation Board held a series of hearings in the middle of March looking at this issue of federal oversight of the railroads, pricing, routes, things of that nature. And they're exploring going back to this possible pre-1980 model where the federal government is once again managing that relationship between the railroads and their customers. We think that's a bad thing, especially for the state of Ohio having one of the highest rail service. We think that would negatively impact us more than other states. And so we, fortunately, Congress agrees with us on this issue. The third piece in your packet there is a letter from the top two Republicans and the top two Democrats on the House Transportation Committee. And they wrote that letter back in March to the Surface Transportation Board, asking that they not change the balanced regulatory system that exists that railroads operate under today. Congress has looked at this issue over the last 30 years several times, and in each instance decided it's not in the nation's interest to have the federal government managing the railroads once again. And so that's a good thing that the House has reached out to them. We're working on asking the senators, specifically Senators Portman and Brown, to reach out to the Surface Transportation Board as well, because they have not heard from the Senate, and to explain, one, how important freight railroading is to the economy here in Ohio, and then two, to ask that they maintain the current system and not try to fix something that isn't broke. And so one, I came here today to inform you about that issue, and two, it's our hope that if you agree with us, that you might consider sending a letter to Senators Brown and Portman asking that they weigh in on this issue.
You have a sample letter of some kind?
I could put something together, absolutely, and send something over for you to take a look at.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Who should I direct that to?
Stacy Rolls.
Okay. And then finally, we'd ask that you please keep Go Rail in mind as a resource for any rail questions that you might have in the future. And if we don't have an answer for you, we'll look to find one or to connect you with someone in the appropriate railroad that can provide an answer.
All right, thank you very much for the update, appreciate that. And yeah, if you'd send a draft to Stacy, we'll put something together. I don't have a problem.
It's a question, Jim, how many, just now railroad, how many cars do we ship a month? Is shipped in Seneca County a month?
I think there were about 5, do we have 800 so far this year? Divide, we're through 4 months, but a couple hundred every month.
Yeah. So just in little Seneca County, there's a lot of rail traffic
That's just
vital to a lot of
That's just on
business.
our railroad, the Port
Yeah.
Authority's railroad.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's scads of the CSX trains are going through here all the time.
Yeah.
And the Port Authority owns the
Yeah,
local
I'm on your
short line?
mailing list, I wanted to give you my card.
Sure, I'd love to follow you. There are some federal funds for
Yeah,
infrastructure
yeah,
investment.
okay. I get your email.
Oh, certainly. Yes, yep. Okay, good to see you, Jan. All right, commissioners, thank you. I
All right,
appreciate your
yeah.
time.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right. Next for the work session, EMS new contract. Ken. You're on.
Okay, well, I came up today, I had a couple of things to show you. Like I said at meetings past, we applied for, received a workers' comp grant, which bought us 4 electric pneumatic power cots. I have one with me today to demonstrate that. And also the investment into our vehicle replacement schedule that the commissioners have graciously provided the funding for that. And I have a brand new truck sitting out front to show you guys
So we get to take a field trip.
all the bells and whistles. Yes, we get to walk outside and look at the truck if that's
Right.
what you choose to do.
It's not raining yet, let's go.
No, it's a beautiful day. It's a little chilly, but it is a beautiful day to look at an ambulance. And it is clean and shiny, so you might want to look at it now. As far as the EMS agreement goes that we're talking about, I know there's been a lot of meetings out in the local governments that have all kind of been spurred from our April 5th gathering. And there's been a lot of talk out amongst the local elected officials at the local government levels. And there's not a lot of reports coming back to me, and that's okay. My motivation was to make sure we had personnel to man the trucks. I mean, we make a huge investment into what you're going to see. And but to keep in mind is that truck sits right there. That's exactly what it is. It's a truck. Until we have a 2-person certified crew in it, it's nothing more than a truck. At which time it becomes an ambulance, and then it can actually get to the life-saving part of the routine. So I was hoping that maybe you guys had heard some things out there amongst the communities at the meetings that you attend. And most everything I've heard is positive. I know we have a few elected officials that are researching other options besides volunteer EMS, and that's great. I think free enterprise is a wonderful thing, but I can tell you that 911 EMS doesn't make money. We're a service, and we're good at it, but we don't make money.
I tell you, and just reading the paper was in, just the other day where I read the paper that Attica, or no, the New Riggle and that group are coming together. They're looking at potentially putting a levy on, and a couple articles that I've read for the different groups that have been coming together. It seems to be very positive, and
Most
they're
of it
looking
is.
at combining and coming up with some sort of revenue that they can model somewhat after the Bascom
Right.
plan
And I
that
think
you've outlined. So
And I appreciate you guys coming to the meetings with me and emphasizing the fact that, well, we're not trying to force their hand to do anything. What we're trying to do is just make sure that they have personnel available. We are a community-based ambulance service. We need the support of the community to be that. Whether they choose to group together in joint ambulance districts, which is the model that we've proposed, and I think it's going to be the most successful model in the long term. I've not heard anything really negative about it. There's all been mostly positive comments. There's been some questions and some people that are educating themselves on EMS, which I think is a great thing. So I think once all this research and development and everything shakes out all the way down to the bottom, they're going to agree that what our plan is probably the best plan. And like you said, the Attica Venison Reed District has come together, and I think they are considering a nominal fee option where they're going to compensate their volunteers. NBS, New Riggle, Big Spring, Seneca is doing the same thing. I haven't heard much out of the Liberty Township, Bettsville, Jackson Township area, and I haven't heard a whole lot other than I know they're researching in the Pleasant, Green Springs, Adams area. And we've heard that Bloomville, Bloom Township, Scipio, and Republic are also discussing some things. So the good news is the word's out. There's a big buzz in the air about EMS personnel and manning, and I'm just kind of waiting for that next thing to happen. And I don't know how to make that happen, so I have to wait until the local elected officials, and I realize it's an election day and there's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of busy people in the world, but waiting for that next step to kick us into the next phase of this plan.
Ken, you planted the seed.
Sure have, and I've got to wait on it.
And now, I believe it's taking root now, and we just have to see over the coming months and how this is going, but I think the groundwork that you've laid out is, I hear a lot of positive things out there too, and so.
Right.
It's
Well, I
just-
appreciate
It's gonna
that.
take time. This is a, what do they call this, a marathon, not a sprint.
I'm not notoriously a patient person, so
Now, we have the agreements down listed under old business. We could talk further about that then, or are you gonna need to go? Do you wanna talk about that before we go outside, or?
that's fine. We can talk about, I'm fully prepared to talk about anything related to EMS.
Okay, well, let's go outside and see
Well,
that.
Let's do that.
can we do, I mean, I know there's a group here that before we go outside, there's a group here that would like to talk about the museum and so forth, and I wanna make sure that we get that in. I didn't realize for work session, we needed to get that on the agenda, so.
Well, you don't have to,
that-
it's just that the two we had, I thought we ought to do first, that's all. We don't have to, we'll probably have time.
I don't wanna short
Should we go out and see the?
what we're gonna talk about with the museum. that-
No, well, let's go out there so that once we get back in, then we don't have to move again.
Works
Let's
for
go
me.
see, let's go see the equipment.
Okay.
And then we should have time, we can leave the agreement under old business and talk about that.
I'll go fire it up, get the lights on.
Anybody else is free to come and see it if you'd like, too.
Yeah, we want to go out and see the,
Anybody else care to go out and see the new, the ambulance with, they've got this new fangled dangled thing that, we've had a lot of back injuries with the EMTs. And this is supposed to be some elaborate thing that we received,
the grant money.
the majority of it through grant money. I think it was 40,000.
Power cot.
So a power cot that does it
Do you know where that?
kind of automatically or something. You don't have to lift it up, so it'd be kind of interesting.
That was do you know where the office is? Yeah, I know.
Pardon?
Right this second.
I want to.
Yeah.
Did you get Dave Camp? Did somebody call him?
I said I'll call him after board.
Oh, okay, okay.
On
That's,
those windows that we did,
I don't know, the number I knew was okay.
I just sit in my little house and write and pay
Good morning, David.
I'm sick. How are you?
Still sick? Yeah.
Yeah, we should have another book.
Don't
I don't
blame
have
you.
a-
Got it, came by honestly, my 9-year-old.
People didn't say there is.
is that correct?